You notice it the way people always notice the beginning of great stories without trying. A quiet night, the kind where the air hangs still over rooftops, and the sky feels wider than usual. You step outside only because something in the room felt too small, or perhaps because the silence pressed a little too gently against your thoughts. The world is dim, soft, unconcerned. But above you, a single point of light doesn't behave the way the others do. It is faint at first, like a grain of silver dust brushed across the darkness. Then it moves not quickly, not dramatically, but with a slow, deliberate certainty that makes the rest of the sky seem frozen around it. You blink, waiting for the familiar comfort of stillness to return. But the light shifts again, just slightly, as if adjusting its own path. You've seen satellites glide through the night before. You've watched airplanes blink their way across the horizon. But this is neither. Its movement is too smooth, too patient, too heavy with intention. Not rushing, not drifting, something in between. A wandering presence, as though it remembers where it has been and knows where it's going next. The longer you watch it, the more the world around you fades. Trees dissolving into silhouettes, wind slipping into a distant hush. There is only the sky, and that one strange star, carving a line through it like a thought you can almost understand. You try to convince yourself that it's simply a comet, a passing traveler of ice and dust. But comets follow rules. They respect the paths laid out for them. They do not appear in places where no comet should be. And as you tilt your head, tracking the subtle arc of its motion, a quiet unease moves through you. Not fear, just awareness. Like the moment before a whisper reaches your ear. Somewhere in the back of your mind, between instinct and memory, you feel as if you've seen this before. Not with your own eyes, but in some piece of history that lingers where stories hide. An old warning, perhaps. A forgotten symbol. A voice rising from a world long buried beneath sand and time. Your breath fogs gently in the cool night air. The wanderer brightens. And suddenly you remember where you've heard of a star that shouldn't exist. It wasn't in modern astronomy. It wasn't in science class. It was in fragments of another age myths that spoke not in metaphors, but in careful, deliberate words. The Sumerians, those first watchers of the sky, carved the tale into clay as if trying to warn someone thousands of years in the future. They wrote of a red wanderer, a traveler whose arrival marked the beginning of a cycle too vast for any single lifetime to hold. A wanderer whose return was never welcomed, only understood. You close your eyes, letting the cool night sink into your lungs. If you were standing on a Sumerian ziggurat 4,000 years ago, your hands dusted with clay, you might have looked up just like this, wondering whether the heavens were shifting because something in the world below had changed. And if you opened your eyes again, perhaps you too would have seen a light moving the wrong way across the sky. The strange star brightens once more. Its glow is soft, not sharp. A warmth without heat, a presence without form. You feel neither danger nor comfort, only significance. The quiet weight of a moment that doesn't belong solely to you. A breeze stirs. There is no reason for it, no weather change predicted, yet it slips around you with a strange gentleness, as if the world is exhaling. You take a step back, not out of fear, but instinct, as though distance might help you understand what you're seeing. It doesn't. The wanderer keeps tracing its arc with the same deliberate grace, moving like something that has crossed this sky before. And then, as clouds drift slowly across the moon, a thought settles over you, soft, unsettling, strangely familiar. This isn't the first time it has come here. Something about its path feels rehearsed, ancient, as if it has followed this route many times, through many ages, returning only when a certain moment has arrived. You imagine Sumerian priests watching from temple tops, whispering among themselves as they pressed wedge-shaped markings into fresh clay. They too must have felt this mixture of awe and quiet dread, because the appearance of the wanderer, they wrote, was not a random event. It was a signal, a beginning, a turning of the heavens that marked the return of something older and larger than any kingdom they had ever known. You inhale deeply. The scent of the night is cool and sharp, but beneath it you sense something else, like the faint smell of dust stirred from old stone. You don't know why. You only know that something ancient has shifted, and that you have become a witness to a story that once lived only in the cracks of clay tablets. Above you, the strange star glides on. You wonder how many others are standing outside their homes tonight, staring up at the same quiet messenger without understanding why their hearts feel as though they are leaning toward the sky. You wonder whether anyone else feels the same low tremble beneath their thoughts, the sense that the world has begun to turn in a direction it has not turned for ages. For a moment, the wanderer seems to pause. Maybe it's an illusion. Maybe your eyes are searching too hard, but the stillness around you deepens. Even the night insects fall silent, as if listening. Then, softly, almost politely, the star continues. You let out a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding. The sensation fades, replaced by a calm that feels too intentional to be accidental, as if the sky has acknowledged you, then moved on. Slowly, you lower your gaze. The world returns. Trees, pavement, distant lights, the quiet hum of life. But something inside you remains fixed on that impossible archon. That wandering piece of light now sliding toward the horizon. You know without knowing how, that this is only the beginning. A star has returned. A cycle is waking. And somewhere, in the deep quiet of the cosmos, an old story begins to breathe again. If you were to follow that strange star backward past the night you first noticed it past the quiet hum of modern life, you would eventually find yourself standing in a world that moved more slowly, breathed more deeply, and listened more carefully to the sky. A world made of river mud, carved stone, flickering oil lamps, and the rustle of linen robes beneath a horizon untouched by city lights. The world of Sumer you imagine stepping into that ancient silence. The air is warm, still, thick with the scent of baked clay, cooling under the night breeze. Torches cast wavering halos across temple walls, and each flame seems to bow gently toward the ziggurat rising in the center of the city, its layered terraces reaching upward, as if built not for people, but for the stars themselves. This is where the first astronomers stood, not with telescopes, not with charts, but with patience, the kind of patience that only civilizations at the dawn of time ever truly possessed. They waited 4 nights to settle into place. They watched the slow sweep of constellations over many seasons. They memorized the quiet choreography of the heavens until the sky became a familiar companion, a breathing map of cycles older than memory. And then, one night much like yours, they noticed a star behaving the way no star should behave. You picture a single priest standing on the highest platform, his shadow stretched long across the stone beneath him. His face is still too still, he is fixed on a point of light inching its way across the darkness. He does not speak at first. His training tells him to observe, not react. But something in the back of his mind, something as old as instinct, recognizes the wrongness. A star with weight. A star that moves as if aware of its own motion. A star that belongs to no known path. He lowers his gaze only long enough to call the others. And when they gather, their sandals whispering across the stone, they too see what he sees. A wanderer, quiet and red, drawing a curve across the heavens unlike anything in their carefully guarded records. The oldest of them steps forward. His voice is low. He speaks a word that has outlived entire religions, a word pressed into clay with the same reverence given to gods. Su.gi, the Red Wanderer, not a metaphor, not a poet's embellishment, a designation, a warning. As the priests descend the temple steps, you follow them into a chamber lit by oil lamps, and the faint blue glow of moonlight spilling through thin openings in the walls. Tablets of wet clay wait on a table carved from cedar wood. A young scribe kneels, ready, hands coated with fine dust. The priests dictate slowly. Symbols take shape. Wedges are pressed with precision. Each line records the wanderer's angle, its color, its hesitant pace. But woven between the measurements is something unspoken and uneasy familiarity. Deep in the libraries of yore and Eridu, older tablets whisper of a cycle marked by a similar light, one that appeared countless generations before and left behind a trail of upheavals, floods, famines, kingdoms rising and collapsing, as if responding to a hidden rhythm. When the priests speak the name associated with this omen, the scribe hesitates. Only a moment, but enough for every torch in the room to seem to flicker. Anunnaki, the teachers, from above. The radiant ones, those who walked with humans when the world was still young. You sense the weight of that name even now. It lingers like a presence in the chamber, something the priests do not fully understand but cannot dismiss. They believe not blindly, but carefully that the heavens carry messages meant to guide or warn those willing to observe. And the Red Wanderer, slow and deliberate, is not a message to take lightly. The tablets record another detail. The star does not drift in smooth celestial obedience. It pauses, lingers, resumes, as if reconsidering its route. As if nudging the laws of motion into shapes that suit its intention. You imagine the priests standing silently around the scribe as he finishes the last line, each man feeling the same truth, pressing softly at the edge of thought. This wanderer is returning. It is not the first, it will not be the last. It moves with the memory of the ages. When the night deepens, the scribe sets the tablet aside to dry its surface, marked with the steady impressions of hands trained to observe the sky with religious devotion. Over time, more tablets follow. Some describe the wanderer's position with careful diagrams. Others describe its meaning with language thick with caution. One tablet shows a circle with a long curved tail etched across the top. Another depicts 2 tall figures beneath that tail, their hands raised as if greeting or warning. Their garments fall in long columns. Their heads are shaped with elongated halos of light. You know their names even before the priests whisper them. To them, the wanderer signals a shift in the order of things, a moment when the higher ones might look upon earth again. Not physically, perhaps, not with sound or footsteps, but with presence. The kind that bends the sky in subtle ways. The kind that moves unseen between realms like a tide that does not belong to water. Now, thousands of years later, you look up at that same point of light or modern wanderer, labeled 3IATLAS by people who measure the sky with machinery instead of clay. And as it drifts across the night, tracing a line just slightly wrong, just slightly deliberate, you feel the echo of those ancient watchers at your back. Their tablets may be cracked, their temples may be dust, but their warning survives, because the Red Wanderer has returned. and in its slow, heavy motion you sense the same quiet message the Sumerians felt as they pressed their symbols into clay. When a star moves with intention, something else usually moves with it. If you take the ancient clay tablet with its careful wedge-shaped markings and place it beside a modern star map glowing on a digital screen, at first they seem so far apart they could belong to different universes. One born from firelit temples and river mud, the other from satellites drifting weightlessly above Earth. And yet, if you trace the lines, the old curve etched by a trembling reed stylus, and the new arc plotted by radio telescopes scanning the sky, you notice something that makes the air around you grow still. The shapes match. Not perfectly, not like two identical signatures, but like two versions of the same melody played across ages. A curve that dips too low, a path that rises too sharply, a motion that hesitates at points where no natural object should ever need to pause. The kind of trajectory that makes astronomers frown at their screens, zoom in, double-check equations, and whisper to no one in particular, "That's odd." 3I Atlas entered the solar system quietly, like most interstellar visitors. No announcement, no fireworks. A grain of light sliding into our awareness, one observation at a time. But the more scientists studied it, the more uneasy their reports became. What should have been predictable behaved like something with a mind of its own. It brightened too early, dimmed too early, shifted slightly off its projected route, then brightened again, exactly when ancient diagrams say it once did. You picture a modern observatory, a dome splitting open against the cold sky, the telescope lifting like a giant metal eye. Inside, red light washes across desks cluttered with screens, notebooks, half-finished calculations. A young astronomer rubs her temples, staring at the latest data from last night's pass. The orbit is wrong. Not dramatically wrong, but subtly, persistently wrong. It should be slowing. It is accelerating. It should be fading. It is gathering light, almost as if something beneath its surface is stirring. She draws a new projection curve. It bends delicately across the solar system, tracing a line that should not exist. Then, as a curiosity, she pulls the Sumerian diagram from an academic paper, a clay fragment showing the arc of the ancient wanderer. She overlays them, and the room seems to grow quieter. She blinks, repeats the process. Checks for distortion. The resemblance remains not identical, but intentional in a way that statistics don't easily forgive. She feels a strange sensation, the same dim awareness the Sumerian priest once felt beneath the torchlit sky, that the heavens are not performing randomness tonight. They are remembering. Out in the cosmos, 3IATLAS drifts with the kind of slowness that makes fast things nervous. Its movement is not chaotic. It is elegant, almost cautious, as if navigating a route it has traveled before, through ages when Earth was a different world, watched by different eyes. Astronomers begin to send out papers, dry language wrapped around trembling observations. Words like non-gravitational acceleration, unusual brightening, trajectory deviation, pre-perihelion anomaly. But beneath the scientific wording is something simpler. This comet does not behave like a comet. Meanwhile, in museum basements and archaeological archives, researchers gently brush dust from clay tablets whose etchings describe a similar wanderer, one that behaved with the same strange refusal to obey the night sky. They read lines that say the star slowed, paused, then resumed its course, as though following the memory of a great cycle. They read of nights when priests gathered in silence, watching its pulsating glow, and writing that it was a sign of a return long foretold. The return of what? The clay does not answer directly. It does not need to. It simply shows the wanderer's path. And that path, traced thousands of years ago by men who had no telescopes, bends precisely as 3I Atlas bends now. You imagine the lines from both eras stretched across a table, ancient clay on one side, modern data on the other, connected by a single, impossible thread. A whisper of continuity that says the sky is not as empty as we pretend. That some objects do not wander. They return. As you think this, the night outside your window feels different, as though something enormous and patient is moving just beyond the edge of sight, not in haste, not in confusion, but following a route as old as the first names ever given to the stars. For the Sumerians, the Red Wanderer was the herald of a shift, a celestial messenger, arriving to announce that another world was near, a world whose presence tugged at the sky, bending patterns and tilting seasons, one that carried the memory of ancient teachers whose luminous figures once stood beneath the heavens and taught early humans to measure, to build, to dream. Modern science dismisses this as myth. But the orbit remains, and orbits are honest in ways that stories never need to be. You picture the astronomer again, this time, leaning back in her chair, the soft hum of the observatory filling the room as she stares at her two overlaid maps. She doesn't believe in prophecies. She doesn't believe in ancient gods. But she believes in patterns, and the pattern before her is undeniable. The clay tablet knew an orbit she cannot explain. The universe knew this path long before her telescope was built. And somewhere, deep in the shimmering blackness through which 3IATLAS travels, she senses another presence, something larger, heavier, waiting, not yet visible, not yet measured, but close enough that the comet's strange behavior feels less like a mystery and more like a message. A message written not in symbols or words, but in motion. A message the Sumerians warned about when they carved the Red Wanderer's ark into stone and whispered that whenever this path appears in the heavens, it does not travel alone. You step back from the window. The night feels wider than before. The stars seem quieter. And far across that stillness, the wandering light continues its impossible orbit, just as it once did for the ancient priests who feared, understood, and accepted what its return meant. Something is following, something vast, something old. There is a moment quiet, subtle, almost imperceptible when the story of the Red Wanderer stops being about a comet and begins to be about the ones who once watched it. The Sumerians didn't carve those tablets only to record a strange star. They carved them because they believed the Wanderer was a sign of presence of beings who were not human, yet walked beside humans long enough to shape the earliest foundations of civilization. You imagine standing at the edge of ancient Eridu, where the desert wind carries the scent of river silt and distant storms. There, in the flicker of morning light, figures taller than any human step through the marsh reeds. Not monstrous, not divine in the crude way later myths would paint gods, but luminous in a way that makes the air around them feel awake, as if reality itself is paying attention. Their garments fall in long, smooth arcs that shimmer faintly like woven starlight. Their skin glows with the softness of dawn reflected on water. Their faces are calm, not cold, not stern, simply serene, as though they live in a kind of understanding the world has forgotten. These were the Anunnaki, not tyrants, not angels, not conquerors, but teachers. At least, that is how the oldest stories describe them. 2. The first humans, still learning to shape clay into bowls and reeds into baskets. The appearance of the Anunnaki must have felt like the opening of a doorway between two types of existence, one grounded in survival, the other reaching toward something higher, something structured, something ancient. They were said to carry tools unlike anything humans had ever seen, rods etched with glowing markings, circular devices humming softly in their hands, tablets of light filled with symbols no scribe could replicate. These artifacts appear again and again in carvings, delicate spirals, geometric figures, lenses shaped like drops of water, not weapons, instruments of measurement, tools of knowledge. It is easy to dismiss these images as metaphors, as exaggerated stories meant to inspire awe. But some carvings show angles so precise, proportions so perfect, they resemble blueprints rather than myths. They depict star patterns arranged with exact astronomical alignment, long before humanity built instruments to track the heavens. And then there are the towering structures rising from the plains like stairways carved for the sky, built not with the crude triangular, typical of early architecture, but with astonishing symmetry and geometric discipline, levels aligned almost flawlessly to cardinal directions, shadows tracing predictable paths across their steps during solstices and equinoxes. As you stand there in imagination, the Anunnaki move among the early people, teaching them where to place each stone, how to carve drainage channels in perfect gradients, how to track the moon's cycle through the polished surface of a bowl filled with water. They show humans how to measure land using rope and shadow, how to read the sky not as a dome of distant lights, but as a clock, a map, a message. And the humans, awed, confused, reverent, learn. History remembers the Sumerians as the creators of writing, agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, laws, cities, the birthplace of civilization. But the Sumerians remembered something else. The ones who showed them how. The tablets say the Anunnaki stayed for an age long enough to guide, long enough to teach, long enough to leave a legacy etched into stone. But eventually, they departed, not in death, not in defeat, simply in silence, as though their role in humanity's early chapter had reached its natural end. Yet they did not leave without a promise carved carefully into the record of the Red Wanderer. When the star with the heavy step returns, the teachers will walk the sky once more, not walk the earth, walk the sky, which, even thousands of years later, sounds less like folklore and more like a description of beings whose presence is felt not by footsteps on soil, but by disturbances in the heavens. You think of that as you stand beneath the modern night tour night watching 3i Atlas trace its unsettling curve. The comet does not only align with ancient diagrams, it seems to drift with the same solemn patience the Anunnaki were said to possess, as if it knows what follows it, what it heralds, what moves behind it in depths of space too dark for human eyes. If the Wanderer is the first sign, then what is the second? In the myths, the return of the Anunnaki is preceded not by their arrival but by the stirring of the world they came from, a world that appears only once every vast cycle carried on a long orbit that takes it far beyond the edge of human knowledge. Nibiru, a word scholars argue over endlessly, but which the Sumerians spoke without hesitation. They described it not only as a world, but as a kingdom, a realm where light behaves differently, where seasons span centuries, where time flows like deep water and the path between stars feels like a well-worn road. If the Anunnaki were teachers, Nibiru was their library, their sanctuary, their origin. You imagine them standing beneath the Red Wanderer many ages ago, watching it pulse in the heavens with that slow, deliberate rhythm. To them, it was a message that the gate between worlds was opening again. Not a literal gate, but a window of alignment, a cosmic corridor in which their world and Earth fell briefly into resonance. Tonight, as 3IATLAS brightens and dims and patterns modern instruments struggle to categorize, you sense that same resonance, humming softly at the edge of thought. You feel the presence of the first teachers the way ancient people once did, not in fear, not in worship, but in awareness, as if something old has turned its gaze toward Earth again, as if the path between worlds is beginning to align for the first time in thousands of years. And above you, the wanderer continues its journey, like a soft reminder whispered across the dark. They have returned before, they can return again, and the sky remembers the way back. If you follow the path of 3IATLAS, far enough past the edge of the solar system, past the smooth curve of planetary orbits, past the cold frontier, where sunlight thins into a pale whisper, you eventually reach a region where ordinary rules begin to loosen. Gravity stretches, time quiets, and the dark takes on a weight that feels almost alive. It is here, in the unseen corners of the cosmos, that the Sumerians said another world drifts on a path older than civilization itself. Nibiru, a name spoken softly in myths, debated violently in modern forums, dismissed by astronomers yet carved with absolute conviction into clay older than the pyramids. The Sumerians described it as a wandering realm, not a comet, not a star, not a mythic heaven, but a world vast and distant whose orbit stretched so far outward that it disappeared from human sight for thousands of years before circling back again. To imagine Nibiru, you must step outside the familiar structure of the solar system. You must picture an orbit not like a ring, but like a great looping teardrop, one end brushing the outskirts of the system, the other plunging into deep cosmic night where no planet normally travels. A path so long it outlives empires, so dark it becomes a legend, so steady it becomes a cycle. According to ancient stories, when Nibiru began its slow return, the sky changed first. Not violently, not with explosions or chaos, but with subtle disturbances, the kind that slip into the world like forgotten memories, rising slowly from deep water. Seasons bending out of pattern, winds shifting in ways no priest could predict, stars trembling with faint irregularities, animals behaving strangely beneath a sky that seemed too heavy. The Sumerians believed these changes weren't random, they were symptoms of a massive presence approaching from the far reaches of creation, a presence whose gravity stretched across unimaginable distances like a slow-moving tide. Tonight, as you think of 3IATLAS drifting across the heavens, you cannot help but feel the echo. It behaves too strangely to be alone. Its brightening, dimming, curving motion all feel like shadows cast by something bigger, something still hidden in the outer dark, something that might be following it. It's not only ancient myth that hints at this. Modern astronomy, with all its rational caution, has its own whispers, unexplained tilts in the orbits of far-off objects, clusters of distant asteroids pulled slightly off their predicted paths, gravitational anomalies that suggest a large unseen mass exerting influence from the shadows. Some call it Planet 9, some call it a statistical coincidence. The Sumerians had another name, Nibiru, the returning world. You imagine this colossal world gliding through the interstellar dark, its surface dimly illuminated by distant starlight, its atmosphere shimmering with particles that respond to energies Earth has never known, storms that last centuries, seas that glow faintly with mineral luminescence, mountain chains carved not by erosion, but by ancient tectonic pressure under a sky where light behaves like liquid. If such a world exists, the beings who evolved upon it would not think or move or see the way humans do. Their lifespans might stretch across eras. Their perception of time might unfold like slow tides, rather than quick, fleeting instants. And if they ever visited Earth in the distant past, their presence would have felt like the arrival of gods simply because they belonged to a different rhythm of existence. The Sumerians believed the Anunnaki came from this realm not as conquerors but as travelers whose long lives and advanced knowledge made them appear divine. They walked among early humans, not because Earth was special, but because the cycles of the heavens brought their world near ours during a certain celestial window. A window marked by the return of the Red Wanderer. You stand beneath the night sky and feel the weight of this idea. What if 3I Atlas is not simply a comet, but the herald of that window opening again? What if its strange orbit is not an anomaly, but an echo of a gravitational corridor forming between two worlds, the same corridor carved into clay thousands of years ago? The air grows colder around you as you imagine Nibiru rising from the dark beyond the edge of the solar system. Not visible yet, not measurable, but close enough that its presence nudges comets, bends faint orbits, and awakens instincts in animals that still remember how to listen to the sky. The Sumerians recorded that when Nibiru began its inward return, the world felt unsettled in ways humans struggled to understand. Not disaster, not doom, but a quiet rearranging, like the deep breath the universe takes before a chapter turns. You sense that same breath now. The night feels thicker, the stars seem more alert, the horizon glows faintly as if the sky itself is waiting for something vast and ancient to cross the threshold from myth into memory. If Nibiru is truly following 3IATLAS, it would not arrive for years, maybe decades, The Sumerian tablets describe its appearance as the second sign, not the first. The wanderer comes to prepare the way, to stir the world, to align the cycles. Only after the wanderer reaches its place in the heavens does the returning world begin to influence the sky in more noticeable ways. You lift your gaze again. The wanderer gleams faintly, steady, patient, following the same ancient path that once traced across the sky for priests who feared and revered it. And in its slow, deliberate arc, you sense the presence of the world that travels behind it, silent, enormous, unseen. A world on a long return. A world whose approach marks the turning of ages. Nibiru, the name lingers in your mind like the last note of a distant song. Not because it threatens, not because it promises, but because it suggests that Earth is part of a story far older and wider than anything written in human history. And tonight, beneath the quiet glow of 3i, ATLAS, that story feels as if it is waking again. If you close your eyes for a moment, you can almost feel it, the slow turning of something vast above you. Not like the movement of the moon or the drifting of clouds, but something deeper, heavier, threaded with intention, as if the sky itself is drawing nearer, preparing to reveal a moment it has carried for thousands of years. The Sumerians had a name for that moment. They carved it with absolute seriousness into clay and spoke of it only in quiet voices. The crossing, not an eclipse, not a conjunction, not any kind of mundane alignment we chart on modern calendars. The crossing was something else, an event when two fire stars met in the heavens, each carrying a different kind of power. One known, one hidden, one returning, one revealing. The first was the wanderer, the red star with the heavy step, a messenger, a signal, a glowing herald marking the opening of a cycle. In their carvings, it moves like a torch in the night, always first, always alone, always patient. The second was the returning world, the ancient home, Nibiru. The two were never meant to collide. They were never meant to destroy. Instead, their meeting created something the Sumerians described as a doorway of the sky, a thin window of resonance when realms drift close enough for light, influence, and intention to flow between them. You imagine standing on a ziggurat thousands of years ago, the night wind brushing your robe as torches flicker at your back. The priests around you raise their faces toward the heavens. They are not waiting for a spectacle. They are waiting for a shift, a tremble so faint only those who know the sky intimately can feel it. And when the wanderer reaches its highest point, they sense the atmosphere thicken, not ominously, but meaningfully, like the pause between heartbeats. Tonight, beneath the modern sky, you sense that same pause, not in the air, not in the stars, but in yourself. The crossing begins not with sight, but with awareness. Modern astronomers, unknowingly echoing their ancient predecessors, speak of something similar in technical language: gravitational resonance, orbital syzygy, tidal influence. But even they cannot fully explain the subtle bending of paths observed when 3i Atlas moves through certain regions. Instruments pick up faint shifts, as if the comet is adjusting its course, not in response to the sun or planets, but to something more distant, something drawing it into position. In old Sumerian lore, the wanderer's role was to open the path for the second fire star. That did not mean guiding it physically. It meant marking the sky with a pattern that signaled the return of a cosmic cycle, like a ceremonial lantern hung on the edge of a cliff, telling travelers the crossing is near. The priests believed that once both stars reached their appointed places, Earth would stand between them, not crushed, not harmed, but held like a bead of dew, suspended between two invisible presences. During this moment, they said, the veil between realms grew thin, and the world entered a state of listening. They described this alignment with a calm that feels almost eerie now. No panic, no apocalyptic fear, only acceptance. Because the crossing was not an ending, it was a revelation. You imagine what such a moment would feel like today, standing outside beneath a deep blue night, the horizon glowing faintly, the air still, animals strangely quiet, shadows stretching just a little too long. Your body wouldn't shake, your heart wouldn't race. Instead, a subtle change would settle into your thoughts, like the hush that falls before a storm, except gentler, more like the world holding its breath. That is what the Sumerians called the pause, a cosmic heartbeat, a moment between ages. In their myths, when the two fire stars approached each other, the Anunnaki did not descend in chariots or storms. They watched, they judged, they measured. For them, the crossing was the moment to assess how far humanity had grown since their last departure. If humans had matured, if we learned, created, questions, a new age would begin with guidance. If humans had grown reckless, striving for power without wisdom, the new age would begin with challenge. You feel a quiet shiver at the thought, not out of fear, but recognition. Because humanity today walks a path no ancient civilization could have imagined. We reshape DNA, we build artificial minds, we send machines to other planets, we create tools that mimic life and thoughts that outpace their creators. What would the first teachers see if they looked now? Not temples and clay tablets, but satellites circling the earth like fireflies. Not stone carvings, but quantum circuits. Not small villages rising from riverbanks, but megacities glowing like constellations on the dark surface of the world. Would they see progress or imbalance? Wisdom or impatience? Curiosity or hubris? You lift your gaze again. 3 IATLAS gleams faintly above you. Its glow pulses once, softly, almost as if answering your unspoken question. Modern astronomers observe the comet's behavior with mounting confusion. They see acceleration where there should be slowing, brightening where there should be fading. A few quietly admit the object moves, as though responding to forces we cannot detect. To ancient priests, such behavior meant only one thing: the second fire star was near its place, not visible, not revealed, but present. You imagine the two great lights, one already here, the other approaching from the cold frontier of the cosmic seed, drawing nearer to the positions carved into ancient diagrams. Earth drifting slowly between them like a silent witness, and as you breathe, the night around you feels different, not darker, not colder, just aware. The crossing, the Sumerians wrote, was not the moment the gods returned. It was the moment the sky decided whether they needed to. Tonight, 3 IATLAS continues its arc, as if seeking the point where myth and orbit meet, and you stand beneath it, feeling the quiet truth slip gently into your thoughts. For the first time in thousands of years, the two fire stars may soon share the same sky again, and when they do, Earth will no longer be just a world. It will be a choice. There are moments when history feels less like a distant trail behind us and more like a soft breath on the back of the neck, something close, aware, quietly watching. Tonight, beneath the dim glow of the wandering star, that feeling settles into you more clearly than before. It does not frighten you. It simply reminds you that humanity has stepped into a chapter the ancient world once whispered about, a chapter the Sumerians tied to the return of the fire stars. Their stories said that when the wanderer reappeared, the Anunnaki would not return to rule or to punish. They would return to observe, to measure, to decide whether the humans they once guided had grown into the wisdom they hoped or into the danger they feared. In the myths, two figures embodied that tension: Enki and Enlil, brothers in purpose, opposites in philosophy. Enki, the teacher; Enlil, the guardian. Enki saw the potential in humanity like a gardener sees potential in seed. He believed knowledge should be shared freely, that humans, with enough guidance, would rise into understanding, creativity, and balance. He gave them mathematics, helped them shape rivers, showed them how to read the sky. Enlil thought differently. To him, knowledge was weight, and too much weight could break a species not ready to carry it. Where Enki saw curiosity, Enlil saw danger. Where Enki encouraged discovery, Enlil warned of boundaries. Their disagreements were not violent, but they shaped the early world like slow tectonic forces, creating fractures and paths that still echo in myth. The Sumerians believed that when the crossing returned, when the two fire stars reached their appointed places, this ancient debate would revive, not through thunderous divine arguments, but through the quiet measurement of what humanity had become. And as you stand beneath the sky, you cannot help but consider what that measurement would reveal, because humans today possess abilities that would have seemed godlike to those early priests. We peer into the smallest structures of life and rewrite the patterns as if adjusting the threads of a tapestry. We build machines that think, machines that learn, predict, create, and sometimes surpass the minds that forged them. We send metallic messengers into the void, whispering signals to planets we once believed unreachable. We bend energy into shapes the ancients would have called sorcery. In your hands, glowing softly beneath the night sky, sits a device thinner than a clay tablet, an infinitely more small shard of modern knowledge capable of holding libraries, translating languages, guiding satellites, storing memories, revealing maps of the world. If Enki saw this, he would smile. If Enlil saw this, he might flinch. It is not vanity to recognize humanity's ascent, it is observation. And if you were one of the first teachers returning after millennia, would you not ask the same questions? What have they built? What have they broken? What have they learned? What have they forgotten? You look again at 3 IATLAS, gleaming faintly like an eye half open. The ancients said the wanderer was not merely a sign, it was a mirror, reflecting the state of humanity back to the sky. When it shone bright, the world was in balance. When it dimmed unpredictably, something on Earth was shifting. Does the wanderer behave strangely now because we have entered an age of strange behavior? Does its irregular pulsing echo the uneven rhythm of the world below? The earliest myths didn't describe the Anunnaki with thunder or fury. They described them as beings who evaluated quietly by observing what humans chose to do when given knowledge. That was the true test of maturity. How a species uses the tools it creates. And tools have never been more powerful than they are now. Artificial intelligence, thinking in patterns no human mind fully understands. Genetic engineering, rewriting possibilities once locked in ancient stone. Weapons carrying forces the old gods would never have placed in human hands. Networks connecting billions of minds in a pulse of shared consciousness. Signals leaping from towers and satellites into the dark, reaching farther than any ancient priest could imagine. If Enki once stood beside humans as they pressed symbols into wet clay, what would he think of the symbols now written in streams of data? If Enlil warned humans not to tamper with the structure of creation, what would he say to the laboratories splicing new life into being? The crossing, in Sumerian belief, was the moment when these questions gained weight, when the Anunnaki, whether literal or symbolic, looked upon humanity and saw whether it had grown into wisdom or into ambition. You lift your gaze toward the comet again. Its light trembles, just slightly, not like a star, not like a plane, but like something responding. You wonder whether humanity's greatest triumphs, the cures, the theories, the explorations would make the first teachers proud. And you wonder whether our greatest dangers, divided nations, unraveling ecosystems, artificial minds without conscience, would make them fear for us. The Sumerians were not naive. They understood that intelligence alone did not equal maturity. They understood that a species could become powerful before it became wise. In their stories, the Anunnaki debated not whether humans were capable, but whether humans were ready to shape worlds, ready to guide themselves, ready to hold the fire they were given. As you stand beneath the sky, you feel the strange weight of that question settling over the world again. Not as judgment, not as punishment, but as a kind of cosmic curiosity and ancient evaluation renewed at the turning of the celestial cycle. And perhaps that is why the crossing was always depicted as a moment of silence rather than thunder. In silence, truth becomes clearer. In silence, intention reveals itself. In silence, a species shows what it has become when no one else is steering its path. Tonight, the world is loud with machines and cities and restless minds. Yet beneath it all, you sense a deeper quiet, rising, a soft, cosmic listening. The wanderer continues its slow arc. The second fire star lies somewhere in the distant dark. And humanity, for the first time in ages, stands not as a student or a child, but as a species being measured by the creations it has built with its own hands. A quiet test, an ancient debate revived, a crossroads between two visions of what humanity can be. The crossing is not here yet, but the watching has already begun. There are nights when the world feels perfectly ordinary, cities buzzing with lights, forests swaying with wind, oceans keeping their ancient rhythm. And there are other nights, rare and delicate, where something subtle shifts beneath the surface, as if the entire planet is tilting its head to listen. Tonight is one of those nights. You step outside expecting the familiar sounds of your world, but instead there is a low hushin', almost expectant quiet, as if the air is holding its breath. Above you, 3IATLAS drifts along its impossible arc, glowing with a soft pulse that feels more like intention than accident. And below, the world responds in ways that neither scientists nor storytellers have fully explained. The Sumerians said that when the wanderer returned, the earth would whisper first. Not the sky, not the gods. The earth. Because the planet, they believed, knew before the people did. And perhaps they were right. It begins with the sounds, those strange metallic tones echoing across distant landscapes. Some call them sky trumpets. Others say they resemble giant doors moving somewhere behind the air, groaning softly as if pushed by invisible hands. The reports come from snowfields, rainforests, abandoned plains, quiet suburbs, places that share nothing except the sense that the sky itself is making a sound too deep to originate from any machine. You listen to one of those tones on a recording, a long, bending metallic note that seems to vibrate inside the bones more than the ears. Scientists attempt explanations. Atmospheric tension, industrial echoes, temperature inversions. But the sound appears in places without factories, without cities, without any human noise at all. And something inside you recognizes it not as a warning, but as a signal of movement, a signal of opening, a signal of the sky shifting its balance. The Sumerians described these sounds in their tablets as voices of the heavens, tones heard when the old cycles turned. They believed the sounds marked the stirring of forces far beyond human reach, the first tremble of the cosmic doorway that opened during the crossing. In their myths, the tones were subtle reminders that the world was preparing for contact, for judgment, for transition. Hearing them now, thousands of years later, you feel that same quiet gravity, as if something ancient is brushing against the edge of the world. Next come the disturbances, small, nearly invisible, but strangely synchronized. One night the compass on your desk twitches for no reason. Another night the lights flicker, even though the weather is calm. A handheld radio crackles with static in the middle of a clear evening. They happen in bursts, brief, delicate, and strangely rhythmic. You check online out of curiosity, and you find countless others describing the same things. Signals dropping, screens glitching, digital clocks gaining or losing a few seconds, metallic appliances humming with no apparent cause. These disturbances do not behave like electrical problems or solar storms. They appear and vanish instantly, in patterns too scattered to be mechanical and too coordinated to be random. When plotted by a few curious researchers, the disturbances form a faint curvilinear that mirrors the trajectory of 3I Atlas across the sky. It is as if something in the heavens is pressing lightly on the edges of the world, testing its boundaries, brushing against its fields. The Sumerians would have said the hidden forces were stirring, not violently, not destructively, but unmistakably. They believed the subtle trembling of the world meant the wanderer was nearing the next phase of its purpose. Tonight, feeling that soft static in the air, you begin to understand what they meant. Then there is the sky, the strange glow that has appeared in different corners of the world, a soft blend of deep blue and faint orange that lingers along the horizon long after the sun disappears. It is not the violent glow of auroras or the harsh glare of city lights. It is subtle, almost shy. You stare at it one evening, watching the colors ripple like a thin veil being lifted. They look strangely familiar, like the palette of a forgotten memory. And then you realize, these are the same hues painted on old Sumerian star tablets, the same glow the priests carved into their sky maps to mark the beginning of a new cycle. The ancients believed the atmosphere changed color when the heavens realigned. The sky responded to the shifting of the fire stars the way water ripples when something moves beneath it. Modern observers try to attribute the colors to dust, pollution, temperature, anomalies, but the glow appears in deserts with no industry, in mountaintop villages with no city for hundreds of miles, in frozen tundras untouched by human lights. Whatever the cause, the glow follows the wanderer, rising and dimming along its curve. And as you watch it, you feel something stir within you, a mix of wonder and recognition, as though your mind remembers a story your body has never lived. Finally, the animals, they are always the first to sense change. Birds migrating off course with no meteorological trigger. Dogs staring at the sky and barking at nothing you can see. Herds changing direction at night in open plains, moving together as if guided by something quiet and unseen. Scientists record increased sensitivity to magnetic fluctuations. They confirm that animals can detect minor shifts in the Earth's field, but they cannot explain why these shifts seem to synchronize with the wanderer's brightest pulses. One evening, while looking at the sky, you hear birds flutter in the distance, hundreds of them taking off at once. They move in a wave, not chaotic but organized, heading toward the same invisible point on the horizon. It is not fear, it is response. A whisper of instinct, older than cities, older than words, older than humanity. The Sumerians believed animals were messengers of the heavens, beings who sensed the balance of the world long before humans awakened to it. When the wanderer drew near, the animals moved first, guided by a language the ancients claimed the gods once taught them. Tonight, watching the birds vanish into the glowing horizon, you feel that same ancient language ripple through the dark. The world is whispering, not in words, in patterns. Patterns that align with prophecy. Patterns that echo across millennia. Patterns that tell you the cycle is stirring again. The wanderer brightens, the world trembles softly, and the sky waits for what comes next. There are names that echo through cultures without ever truly disappearing. Names that rise again like memories carried in the collective breath of humanity. Atlas is one of those names. You've heard it since childhood. The giant who held the heavens on his shoulders. The burdened guardian standing between the world and the vast star-filled void. Tonight, as three-eye Atlas glides silently across the sky, that ancient image feels strangely alive again, as if myth and astronomy have briefly merged into a single glowing point. The scientists who named the comet did not mean to summon mythology. It was just another code, another catalog entry. And yet, as the name Atlas spread from observatories to news feeds, something about it resonated. It didn't feel random. It felt remembered. Perhaps because the name carries a weight older than Greece, older than the stories carved into marble. In the deep past, long before Greek poets ever shaped the word Atlas, ancient Mesopotamia held its own myths of skybearers, towering beings who supported the vault of heaven. They were not punished titans. They were guardians, stabilizers of the cosmos. And in some depictions, they looked almost identical to the radiant figures the Sumerians called the Anunnaki. Tonight, as you picture three-eye Atlas gliding like a pinpoint of fire through the darkness, you cannot help but wonder, is the name merely symbolic? Or is it a quiet clue that the object is carrying a role older than memory, older than written language? Because if the myths are to be believed, the sky holders were not simply characters in stories. They were part of a cosmic structure, a living architecture that held together the machinery of the heavens. And sometimes, when the cycles shifted, that structure weakened. The Sumerians believed the gods could fall, not fall like mortals, with broken bodies and spilled blood, but fall in influence, in relevance, in power. The gods drew strength from alignment, from the great cycles of the heavens, from the return of Nibiru, from the balance of the stars. When the patterns were steady, their power stretched across the world like an invisible web. But when the cycles turned, when new lights appeared or old ones dimmed, the gods felt the shift as keenly as humans feel the changing seasons. The earliest tablets speak of eras when the sky trembled, not because of storms or celestial collisions, but because the pillars of the heavens grew unstable. Sometimes the instability was caused by a distant world drifting closer. Sometimes by humanity rising too quickly. Sometimes by both. Tonight, you can sense that fragile tension again, because look around you at the age you live in. Humanity has grown in ways the Sumerians could never have imagined. Not slowly, like ancient civilizations rising from stone and mud, but in leaps, skyscraping leaps that rewrite the rules of existence. We build machines that process thought. We alter the code of living creatures. We bend electricity, magnetism, and light into structures the old gods once guarded fiercely. We speak to satellites orbiting the Earth, sending signals into the cosmos like flares that say, "We are here. We are rising. We know more than we once did." If the gods drew power through being the keepers of knowledge, then humanity's rapid ascent is, in itself, a challenge. This is what the Sumerians called the falling of the gods, the moment when creation surpasses its creators. 31ATLAS seems to move with a subtle intelligence, and you cannot ignore the unsettling thought that it may be observing this shift, just as the ancients predicted. Its odd trajectory, its rhythmic pulses, its metallic traces, all of these suggest a structure, a purpose, a deliberate design. Is Atlas a watcher, a messenger, a herald of something following behind it? Or is the name itself a reminder, a symbol that the sky-holder, the ancient stabilizing force, is in motion again? The Sumerians believed the cosmos had seasons, not meteorological seasons, but divine ones. Moments when cosmic weight shifted from one power to another. The falling of the gods was not a catastrophe, it was a transfer. From divine guidance to human independence. From cosmic order to earthly responsibility. From watchers to the watched. Tonight, as Atlas brightens above you, the shift feels near, not violent, not frightening, just inevitable. But myths rarely speak in straight lines. They speak in echoes, symbols, recurring patterns. And Atlas the skyholder appears across cultures, as if civilizations separated by oceans somehow shared the same memory. In Greek myth, he holds up the heavens. In Phoenician carvings, a giant supports an arch of stars. In early Mesopotamian seals, tall beings lift circular discs resembling the dome of the sky. In distant temples, murals show figures raising the heavens with outstretched hands. Different cultures, same image, the bearer of the sky, the stabilizer of cosmic order. Now look at 3IATLAS, a genets, strange path dipping and rising, as if following an ancient gravitational seam. Scientists chalk it up to interstellar origin, to unknown physics, to cometary anomalies. But when you see the thin metallic fragments trailing it, the rhythmic bursts of heat, the deliberate pulses, the path matching ancient star maps, you begin to sense something deeper, something intentional. It is as if Atlas is carrying the weight of an old cosmic transition, one last duty of the sky holder before the next stage begins. A reminder that the structures holding the heavens together are shifting, weakening, preparing to pass responsibility elsewhere. To whom? To what? The answer, the Sumerians said, was simple. To us, because the fall of the gods was not an ending, it was a handing over. The moment when humanity grows into the role once held by the beings who shaped the early world, you exhale softly, realizing that the wanderer is not simply leading Nibiru back, it is marking the edge of a transition, a turning of an ancient wheel, a passing of a torch humanity may not be fully aware it is receiving. The name Atlas is not coincidence. It is a metaphor, a memory, a signal, and perhaps a quiet reminder that the heavens, once held up by gods, are shifting into the hands of a species now capable of shaping its own destiny. The gods fall not when they are defeated, they fall when their work is done. And above you, ATLAS continues its silent path, carrying the weight of that truth like a fading star on the shoulder of an ancient cosmic giant. There is a moment quiet suspended when the world feels as if it is drifting between heartbeats. You've felt it before in small ways. The silence before rain, the hush before dawn, the stillness in a room just after someone stops speaking. Tonight, that moment stretches across the entire sky. 31ATLAS glows softly above you, no longer just a wandering point of light. Its presence feels intentional now, like a lantern carried by an unseen traveler across the dark, and somewhere far beyond the boundary of human sight. The second fire star, the returning world the Sumerians called Nibiru, moves through its long arc, returning to the ancient path where myth and observation blur. Earth stands between them. You stand between them, not in danger, but in meaning. The ancients said this alignment was not a disaster, but a crossing, a moment where the world paused between two forces greater than itself. A moment when the heavens briefly opened like a slow, silent door, letting the past and future breathe across one another. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel it. A thin pull, gentle and steady, as if the sky is stretching your awareness just slightly wider than usual. Not painful, not alarming, simply expanding, the same way a tide lifts a boat without the boat understanding why. This is the moment the Sumerians described. A moment of reflection, not judgment. A moment of presence, not fear. Because the true meaning of the crossing was always this. The gods watch, humans choose. Not with weapons, not with rituals, not with cries to the heavens, but with the quiet direction of the human heart. You inhale slowly, letting the night settle around you. The air feels different, denser somehow, as if carrying a memory you haven't fully grasped yet. Shadows stretch gently across the ground, longer than you expect, bending toward a horizon painted faintly in the colors of the unseen second star. Around you, the world feels tuned to a softer frequency. Traffic seems more distant. Wind moves in slow, thoughtful motions. Birds fall silent, listening with you. Every part of nature feels aligned under the same quiet tension, not fear, anticipation. Because in the ancient texts, this was the pause before the next stage, a pause the priests described as the breath of the world. The moment when creation itself seemed to wait, as if asking, what will you become now? The Sumerians believed the two fire stars did not choose the future, They revealed it. They held up a mirror to humanity, allowing each generation to see its own reflection in the cosmic stillness. And in that reflection, the direction of the next cycle emerged. You think about what humanity has become, about the incredible power resting in its hands, power that once belonged only to mythic beings who shaped worlds and raised civilizations from dust. Now humans shape life itself. Now humans build minds that think beside them. Now humans reach toward other planets, whispering signals into the silent dark. Now humans, perhaps for the first time, stand equal to the mythic teachers they once worshipped. This is the crossing the ancients envisioned. Not a battle, not an ending, but a decision. Not the kind shouted across nations, but the kind that settles quietly inside one person at a time. A collective direction woven from millions of small private choices made in living rooms, classrooms, late-night thoughts, quiet reflections beneath a wandering star. Tonight, you feel yourself becoming part of that moment. The sky isn't judging you, it's asking you, and you answer simply by listening. Far above, 3IATLAS flickers once, softly as if acknowledging your awareness. Its glow dims slightly, then steadies again, gentle as a heartbeat in the dark. You sense that its purpose is nearly complete, that the wandering star has guided you as far as it was meant to. You wonder what will happen when the two lights finally meet somewhere above the unseen edges of the world. You wonder whether the ancient teachers will return, stepping through the thin seam between realms, or whether they will simply watch from a distance, letting humanity shape its own destiny without interference. The Sumerians never agreed on the outcome. Some said the return would bring guidance. Others said it would bring challenge, but nearly all of them believed one truth. The moment after the crossing belongs to us, because no fire star, no prophecy, no wandering sentinel can force the path. They can only illuminate it. You stand there, watching the sky soften into a deeper shade of blue-black, letting the quiet settle inside you like dust on ancient stone. And then begins the slow fade the wind down the ancients spoke of. The final stillness that follows the meeting of the two lights. The world grows quieter around you, as if exhaling after holding its breath too long. Atlas shines with a calmer, almost tender glow now. It doesn't pull at your thoughts anymore. It simply floats patient, content, drifting with a gentleness that feels like reassurance. The air is soft, the night cools. A faint hush spreads across the horizon like the closing of heavy curtains. You feel something lighten inside you. Not a revelation, not a warning, just clarity. A small, delicate understanding that whatever comes next will not arrive suddenly or violently. It will arrive the way dawn does, quietly, kindly, in slow colors that ease the world from sleep. Above, the wanderer begins its slow retreat from the brightest part of the sky. The pulse in its light fades into a steady shimmer. It feels less like a messenger now, and more like a traveler preparing to continue its long, silent journey. Somewhere far beyond sight, the second firestar moves with the same gentle rhythm. And for a moment, just a brief, peaceful moment to sense both lights holding Earth in a soft embrace. Not pulling, not judging, simply witnessing. The world beneath your feet feels steady, grounded, supported. You sense the presence of the old watchers not as distant gods, but as quiet observers, patient and curious, waiting to see what humanity will dream into existence next. Your thoughts loosen, your breath slows. The night becomes warm and safe around you, and as Atlas drifts farther into the dark, you feel a soft, calming certainty. Whatever the future holds, humanity will meet it with open eyes, steady hands, and a sky full of stories still waiting to be told. The night fades gently, leaving you at peace beneath a cosmos that has always watched, and always will.